Good day, people of YouTube. What's going on? My name is AK, owner of Remastered Productions, and today I'm bringing you yet another X-React video presentation. And today we're going to be talking about the situation with EmuParadise. EmuParadise is one of the biggest websites, if not the biggest website in the world of emulation. It's hosted thousands of retro games spanning from the Atari 2600 all the way up to the Wii, and it has been, again, a source of emulation for a long time now, about nearly 20 years at this point. But after all these years, the website has just recently made a very drastic move, and that is that all of its games, every last one of them, have been taken off of the website. This was recently announced, and if you go on their website and you try and download any of the games, the listings for all the games are still there. But when you go to the download links, you will see that it says that the game is unavailable. There will be like a little question mark with a hyperlink attached to it. Once you hit the question mark, it'll take you to the announcement, which is titled that EmuParadise is changing. And I'm going to read an excerpt from this announcement, which basically summarizes what has happened here. And this comes from the creator of EmuParadise, who says that it's not worth it for us to risk potentially disastrous consequences. I cannot in good conscience risk the futures of our team members who have contributed to the site through the years. We run EmuParadise for the love of retro games and for you to be able to revisit those good times. Unfortunately, it's not possible right now to do so in a way that makes everyone happy and keeps us out of trouble. You won't be able to get your games from here for now. Where we go with this is up to us and up to you. And that is the end of the excerpt there. So what the creator of EmuParadise is saying here is that he actually explained it more in the full announcement that, you know, within the 18 years that the website has been active, they've had to deal with many different situations with companies trying to get them to remove all their content and whatnot. And they've kept fighting all this time. But now, apparently, that fight is over. They did not name any names as to exactly what has happened, what exact entity forced their hand to make this move. But whoever it was, they did have the legal grounds to do so. I'm going to discuss that in just a second. But after all these years, that fighting is now over. And again, the entire game library is now gone. So looking at this from a legal perspective, how has this happened? Well, whether you want to think so or not, emulation to an extent is illegal. There is a very slim gray area where you can do it legally, but you have to do a lot of very specific things in order to emulate completely legally. So in order to do so, when it comes to the games especially, this is where the majority of people get in trouble. When it comes to the games, the minute you download a game, regardless of whether you own it already or not, it doesn't matter. As soon as you download a game from an unofficial source such as EmuParadise, that is considered piracy. And in the realm of the website, that's considered copyright infringement because that game has a copyright attached to it. So the minute you download that ROM and ISO, that is considered piracy. So you're already illegal there. The only way that you can play retro game totally legally, of course, if it's not on the actual hardware, the only way to do so legally is to buy that game, the original authentic copy of the game, and you need to create a backup on your own. So if it's a ROM or if it's an ISO, you need to create that backup on your own. And when it comes to using the emulator, you have to make sure that the emulator was built with custom code. It cannot be code from the original system that it's emulating from, and you cannot download any BIOS files from somebody else because, again, that is considered copyright infringement. So really, it doesn't matter what you're doing unless you basically get all this stuff on your own. The minute you start downloading stuff, except for emulators, but as long as those emulators don't include, again, the original BIOS files, or if you don't download those BIOS files, then yes, it is legal. But the minute you start downloading any ROM or ISO, it is illegal. And that is why sites like EmuParadise have been targeted. But this isn't the only website that has had to make drastic changes. Two other websites, LoveRETRO and LoveROMS, recently got slammed with a $100 million lawsuit from Nintendo. And that lawsuit included trademark issues and copyright infringements on top of, like, you know, the whole piracy debate. So Nintendo they filed that lawsuit against the creators of those two websites for $100 million. And I think in at least a day or less than a day, both of those websites were taken offline. We do not know at this time what has happened with that because nothing more has been said, only that both those websites were taken offline immediately after that lawsuit was filed. And that's not the only thing that Nintendo did. Nintendo went further and hit a DMCA complaint to GitHub because they were hosting an online GBA emulator which included JavaScript-powered GBA titles. So that online emulator, again, was hit with a DMCA complaint by Nintendo, and thus it was taken down off of GitHub. So you have those two situations that just happened within the last few weeks, and then you have EmuParadise making this move. Now again, EmuParadise has not mentioned any specific entity. They've not denounced anyone, so we don't know who or what forced their hand here, but it could have been Nintendo, since, like I said, Nintendo has been making moves in the emulation scene recently, so it could have been Nintendo. And if it is Nintendo, this is a very timely situation because Switch Online is going to launch next month, September 2018. And when Switch Online launches, it's going to include the classic game selection service, which is actually the successor to the Virtual Console. Now, this classic game selection service is going to offer, for now, Nintendo's only stated that it will offer a few select NES titles, and these titles have been updated to include online multiplayer and leaderboards and whatnot. But these are still effectively the equivalent of Virtual Console titles, except the only way you're going to be able to access them is through the subscription service, which is Switch Online. So could Nintendo potentially be planning to expand this new service to include not just NES titles, but also SNES and N64, maybe even more? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But it is very interesting that they've gone after these emulation websites, LoveRETRO and LoveROMS and GitHub, at this specific point of time, because again, those websites were been around for a little while. So it's just interesting. That's just a theory on my part, but we'll just have to wait and see what comes of this new classic game selection for Switch Online. But when it comes to this whole situation from a legal standpoint, this copyrights, it's a very muddy situation because copyrights, a long time ago, back in the early 1900s, copyright existed for about 25 years. So copyrighted works, after that 25 years expired, would go into the public domain, and then anybody could use it for whatever purpose. But Disney, after they got Mickey Mouse and Mickey Mouse became so popular, they did not want to lose the rights to Mickey Mouse. So they constantly pressured the US Congress to keep expanding upon the copyright laws. So they kept changing and changing and changing. And by the time video games came around in the late 80s, early 90s, copyright laws at that time were at 75 years. So all the games from the Atari 2600, the NES era, those early eras of video games, their copyrights aren't going to expire until 75 years after the date of first publication. And the majority of those games are just about 30 or a little over 30 years old at this point. So we're not even a full halfway into their copyrights expiring. So that's why Nintendo has legal grounds to do stuff like that $100 million lawsuit and many others. And in fact, Nintendo actually has had a skirmish with EmuParadise before, because last year, June 2017, EmuParadise had to take down all of Nintendo's first-party titles because apparently Nintendo went after them for that. So again, still don't know if Nintendo had anything to do with this current situation, but they've had run-ins with EmuParadise before. So just wanted to put that out there. And it just talks about how game copyrights are about 75 years, but the current copyright standard, I think from the early 2000s, late 90s to early 2000s, put it at about over 100 years from the date of first publication. So, most humans live until 70 to 80 years. So 100 years, that's wow, that's well beyond the average human lifespan. So that's the situation with copyrights. Is it fair? In a lot of senses, not really, because especially in this situation, because these games, the majority of these games that were hosted on EmuParadise are games that have been out of production for eons, games that you cannot go to a store and buy now legally, and games that have not been restored to any official website like goodoldgames.com, for example. There's no real way to buy them legally in a lot of cases. So what you end up doing is buying a used copy, or even if it's a sealed copy, it's a sealed copy or a used copy that belongs to someone. It doesn't belong to the company anymore. You're not buying it from a store. You're buying it from either a third-party store or just someone on eBay or something. So the point is the money isn't going to the copyright holder, whoever owns the copyright. The money isn't going to them. Those royalties are nothing. So in that instance, yes, it does kind of make sense why emulation has become so popular. But from a legal perspective, Nintendo and any other company that chases after these emulation websites, again, from a legal perspective, they do have the right to do so. Now, I would like to end this by saying that I used to be a pirate when I was younger. Like, for the majority of my childhood, I pirated a lot of different games. I spent many hours playing emulators, specifically because, like, when I would go to my grandmother's house for the summer, I would be there for like 2 months, and her computer was this old Dell Windows 2000 computer, so it couldn't run anything. Like, remember, this is an old Dell Windows 2000 computer, and this was like in the mid 2000s, before 2010, right? So here I was trying to play on this old Dell, can't run any modern titles at all. Well, modern at that time, right? So I turned to emulators because the computer could run like N64 emulators and GBA emulators. So me and my younger brother, we played a lot of games that way. So I do remember that quite fondly. But as I grew up and as I got the job that I have now, which is being a video games journalist, not only have I gained a new appreciation for, like, you know, all the work and the effort that companies put into making these games, but now that I have a source of income, and I've had that for the last 5 years now, after I started working and I could actually afford to buy all my games and all my hardware, I turned completely away from piracy, turned completely away from emulation, because I just didn't want anything to do with it. So all the games that I own now are games that I've bought or that have been given to me because I got them for review. And when I get a game for review, obviously it's for free. So that's all what's in my library, games that I've either bought or that were given to me for review. Anything else, it's not there anymore. But it was not that way. Let's see, I'm about to turn 20 years old. Yeah, when I was 10, yeah, it was definitely not that way at all. Like, I owned a few games on my own, definitely, but the vast majority of the games that I was playing at that time were not mine. No, those were games that I pirated, or those were emulated games. So I totally get, like, you know, emulation fans. I totally get that because I used to be one of them, but I no longer swim with that crowd. It's been a good couple of years, but I do have those memories, so I do understand why people do emulate and why people do pirate even modern titles. So I don't want to seem like I'm on some high horse. I just wanted to explain this from a legal perspective and just share my thoughts on it. It's hard to say if this is what happened to EmuParadise is unfortunate, because again, from a legal perspective, it was illegal, especially since EmuParadise and also LoveRETRO and LoveROMS were, all three of these websites were selling ad space. So they were profiting off of hosting these games that they didn't have the rights to. So yeah, from a legal perspective, no, they were not doing the right thing. They cannot be defended. But from an ethical perspective, from the perspective of people who love video games, yeah, it's a muddy situation. So I'm just gonna leave it there. But that's all my thoughts I'm gonna share here. Leave a comment down below, tell me what you think about the situation, and I hope to have a discussion with some of you guys. So that's gonna be it for me. Enjoy your day.